We spoke in part one of this Dvar Torah about the potential for Moshe Rabbeinu to uplift Bnei Yisrael to the level of the Sha'ar Nun through speaking to the rock, but sadly he hit the rock. And ultimately by using that mateh, the symbol of the level of the Memtet, the 49 Tahor and the 49 Tameh, a level where separation still exists, this is the meaning behind the double hit, the Mayim, the warning Rabbi Akiva gave to his colleagues that when you get up to that Even Shaish Tahor, don't say Mayim, but in our case, there was Mayim. But how do we get this opportunity in our parasha? Where do we see in the parasha, what is the hint that when Moshe Rabbeinu was standing in front of that Selah, that Bnei Yisrael were at the level of coming up to the Avnei Shaish Tahor, or at the very least Moshe Rabbeinu was on the level of coming up to that holy stone in the Pardes that Rabbi Akiva was speaking about to his colleagues. So in the last few parashiot, we saw the exact opposite. We saw a lot of sin. We saw the sin of Korach. Before that, we saw the sin of the spies. We go back to Ba'alotecha. That's when all the mistakes happened one after the other. So what changed in our parasha Hukat? Why is there such an opportunity right now? Lanu Da'ati, I was thinking that if you look closely at the parasha is trying to say, pay attention, we really were at that moment. So first off, from the very fact that this is the sin that leads to Moshe and Aharon's deaths, it's the sin that said that makes a decree that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you're not going to be able to enter the land of Eretz Yisrael. The punishment alone is telling us that this is no derech agav sin. This is not just some random sin. Oh, the one mistake Moshe made, we needed some kind of an excuse for Moshe and Aharon to die because they have to die with the previous generation that they'd already outlived. It's time for them to die. No, it sounds like, according to the simple pshat of the Torah, this was a really big deal. It was such a big opportunity. The Selah was an opportunity to make a grand Kiddush Hashem in front of the Einei Kol Yisrael. They could have all seen this massive Kiddush Hashem, but it didn't happen. And that's why when you have such a great opportunity, it merits such a severe punishment. So the punishment alone, that Moshe and Aaron are going to die, and they're going to die and not make it into the land of Israel, that itself is pointing to something really big happened, or something big was supposed to happen, and thus the sin was such a big sin. So let's take a look first at the start of this parasha, where I think it's already leading us in this direction. So we begin with the mitzvah in our parasha of the para aduma, the red heifer. The para aduma is the purification process from the tumah of a dead body. Chazal tell us that the para aduma itself is a chok that we can never fully understand. And it also is a sort of a tikkun for the chet egel. Let the mother cow come up, the para aduma, and clean up the mess of the baby calf of the egel hazahav. The golden calf, that was the sin that got us into this lower level to begin with. Our parasha begins with a possible tikkun to the chet egel. So if we're talking about the previous Dvar Torah, part 1, all about trying to get to the level of the Matan Torah, to the level of the first Luchot, and then we lost it again, but we see the start of our parasha was beginning to lay the groundwork with the mitzvah para aduma, the purification process, the concept of the chok itself, which itself had layers of fixing the sin of the egel hazahav. We had that opportunity. Now we said, Bnei Yisrael reached their greatest heights at Matan Torah. That's where we received those 2 crowns on our heads, symbolized by the 2 nuns of Yitzchak, Isaac, Chav, rice. That's the Naaseh and Nishma. The nuns themselves look like crowns. Those are the crowns that came onto our heads, beginning with Naaseh. What was Naaseh? Naaseh was, we told the Kadosh Baruch Hu at Matan Torah, we're going to do even before we learn. Yeah, we'll get to the Nishma, we want to learn too. But Naaseh, we are so committed to you. That full faith, that full acceptance is tied to the concept of Chukim. Chukim, those laws we don't fully understand. Para aduma being the quintessential symbol of a chok, of something we don't fully grasp. But we said naaseh. We're going to do everything. Even if we don't get to the nishma, even if the nishma is not clear, the naaseh is the first thing we say. That's the basis. That's our total acceptance of the mitzvah. That was the power. That was the level we reached. That was the crown that we got at Matan Torah. That's the crown that we can see already hinted to in the mitzvah, para aduma. But Chazal also learned within the context of Para Aduma, the teaching of Adam ki amut ba'ohel. When a person dies in the tent, Chazal learned al derech drush. What is the ohel? The ohel is ohelo shel Torah. It's the tent of Torah. Yaakov ishtam yoshev ohalim. It's the yeshiva. It's the learning of Torah. A person has to memit himself. Adam ki amut ba'ohel. You have to memit yourself, kill yourself, die for the sake of learning Torah. We have to put all of our kochot, all of our energy. That's the nishma. So in the Para Aduma, we have the naaseh nishma. We're going to accept those chukim, even those we don't fully understand. And we have the nishma. We're going to learn, and we're really going to learn. We're really going to toil. Adam ki amut ba'ohel. Although we're going to see in a moment that it's not so clear that this toiling part should have ever actually happened. When we fast forward to our parasha, to our rock, all of a sudden the Torah did a major fast forward. We're the end of the 40 years, 38 years went by in a snap. Actually, the parasha is not even so clear how it happens. We need Chazal to come along and say, oh, don't you see what just happened? Miriam died, we're a brand new, Aaron just died, we're a brand new generation. So now we're generation number 2. The previous generation, those that had left Egypt, had all died out. This is the new generation that's about to reach the land of Israel. So it makes sense right now that maybe we're going to have an opportunity to enter Eretz Yisrael in the way that it was supposed to be. Meaning chronologically, now is the right time to have another great moment, another Matan Torah. Now it's the brand new generation. The previous generation finally died out. Now let's make a brand new Matan Torah. Gather everybody together, make a massive Kiddush Hashem similar to Matan Torah, get us up to that level of the Sha'ar Nun, with Moshe Rabbeinu leading the pack. As we've said throughout our Sha'ar Nun series, the Pesukim of Vahi ben Sarwan V'Om Moshe, Kuma Hashem V'Futzu Oivecha, it's supposed to be Moshe Rabbeinu leading the pack, and with the koach of his dibur, the enemies are going to scatter. They're going to disappear. We're not going to do these crazy fighting wars. Moshe will just speak, and they're going to scatter, they're going to disperse, they're going to run away. Right after this story of the well, we're gonna have the death of Aharon, and then the clouds are gonna disappear, and our enemies from the east of the Jordan are gonna begin to attack us. The campaigns against the nation of the east of the Jordan begin in our parasha, and the parasha then speaks of the Sefer Milchamot Hashem. After we have these miraculous victories, we start to sing this cryptic, poetic Sefer Milchamot Hashem, the wars of God, where at Vahav Vesufa, which Rashi explains poetically, hints to all of these miracles that happened in the desert of enemies, even dying without us lifting a finger. But we had mentioned in the past, the Sefer Milchamot Hashem might actually be a larger Sefer. Some refer to it as the book of Yoshua and Shoftim when we conquered the land of Israel. Others see in this book the story of Jewish history, all of the miraculous wars, including the wars that took place here in Eretz Yisrael, including this year, all of these miracles that have taken place for Am Yisrael throughout Jewish history. That's all part of Sefer Milchamot Hashem. In the past, we suggested that this may be part of the Sefer of the Sha'ar Nun, that hidden Sefer of Vahi ben Sarwan V'Om Moshe, the wars of Moshe. This is the hidden Sefer that needs to be written. But Lanutati, maybe this year we can say a different idea. Maybe the Sefer Milchamot Hashem symbolizes something slightly different. That in this version of the Sefer that took place after Moshe hit the rock, the Sefer that took place where Moshe is not going to be with us to fight those wars, that's going to be a Sefer of Milchamot, of war, of fighting, of toiling, as opposed to the Vayomer Moshe, that Moshe will just speak and scatter and defeat the enemies through Dibur alone. Now it's going to be a lot more difficult. We're actually going to have to fight. But this Sefer itself, this Sefer Milchamot Hashem, seems to come with a tikkun with it. Because at the end of the Sefer, or the last pasuk over there, it says, Umisham Be'era. And from there we travel to a place called Be'er, a place of a well. Hiya Be'er Asher Amar Adonai Moshe, Esof et ha'am ve'etenei lahem mayim. This is the well that Hashem said to Moshe, gather all the people over there, and I'm going to give them water. Az yashir Yisrael tashira azot, alei Be'er enula. And then the Jewish people sang a song over the well, come up well, spring up, bring out the water. So we're singing now a Shira. We know the concept of Shira is always ideal. We sing Shira over the biggest events, the biggest miracles that take place, and ultimately in the future we're going to sing a Shir Chadash Rakadosh Baruch Hu. This is messianic kind of talk, and we sang a song over this Be'er. So those are my initial thoughts, that hinting that there was a massive moment of Kedusha that was taking place by this Selah. But then I found the Akut Reuveni quoting a Tikkunei Zohar that takes us all to the next level. Okay, so now put on your seatbelts. Hold on, guys. We're getting ready for the big stuff right now. Now it's coming out the big guns. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. Let's go to the original source in Tikkun Kaf Aleph Daf Mem Dalet in the Tikkunei HaZohar. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar as follows. It's discussing the concept of Mei Meriva, the waters of fighting, the waters of strife, our story in the Torah. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. What is this language of Meriva? What is this language of Riv, of fighting? He says Riv is also the same letters as Rav, as Rebbe, a rabbi, a Ramban. Our rabbis share the same language as Riv, as fighting. Why is that? So says the Tikkunei HaZohar, it's a hint to the machloket l'shem shamayim that takes place in the milchamot shel Torah over the Torah shebe'al peh. The Torah shebe'al peh, our oral Torah, are all the back and forth arguments, the machlokot l'shem shamayim between the different rabbis. And all of these meriva, all these fighting, these are all part of the Torah shebe'al peh. This all stems from the Mei Meriva. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. We'll read it now in the Aramaic. V'hai Sela, and this rock in our parashah, Itmar ba de lo nafik ela tipin de maya de oraita be'elin psakot. He says that this rock nothing came out of it except for a few droplets. Tipa, tipa, drop, drop. And these droplets are the waters of Torah. These are the psakot, the piskei halacha, the decisions that come out when we're fighting over a halacha. When someone is writing a teshuvah, you're going to have yourself a 50-page teshuvah in Al-Avadi Zebia Omer to talk about one little halacha. It's hard to get out the halacha, to really get to the emet, requires a lot of hard work, and only a couple drops come out with all that toiling. Ubegin vayach Moshe tasela b'mateo pa'amayim, and this is because Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock 2 times with his mateh. Lo nafik minei letipin tipin ze'er sham, because of that hit. That hit symbolizes the pain, the hitting, the toiling, and only a couple of drops are going to emerge. A little bit over here and a little bit over there. The kamut machlokot al ilen tipin, and there are so many controversies, so many machlokot on these drops. Uman garim, and who caused all of this? Dahamorim. These are the morim. These are the teachers. We said that we had the hamorim. Moshe Rabbeinu called them rebels. Morim means rebels, but we know also morim in modern Hebrew means teachers. These are the morim of the halacha, the itmar behon that it says about them. Kol hamoreh halacha b'fnei rabo chayav mitah. Whoever teaches the halacha in front of his rabbi, that is a capital offense. He's supposed to die. We're talking about death coming into the world right now. We're talking about the morim, the moreh, the Jewish people telling Moshe Rabbeinu, pick this rock, don't pick that rock. And Moshe Rabbeinu is worried about the emet. What's the correct rock? Which is the actual one that Hashem wants of me? Umigin da shemuna morim, and that's what Moshe Rabbeinu yells at them. Shemuna morim, you teachers, you rebels. And this is what caused him to hit the rock twice with his staff. But if Moshe had not struck the rock, lo havutarchin Israel betanaim be'amoraim be'oraita be'al peh de'ihu sela. Why? Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. If he had not hit that rock, then we would not have to be toiling. All the Tanaim, all the Amorim. I saw one place brings down the double hit, the Mayim. We have a Torah Shabbat, a Talmud Bavli, a Talmud Yerushalmi. All of the Torah Shabbat Peh that we have it corresponds to the Sela, the Ihi Sela. The Torah Shabbat Peh is the Sela. It's the rock, and we would not have to toil. Had Moshe not hit it, it wouldn't have been so difficult. We wouldn't have to work so hard. This takes us back to the Beit HaLevi that we spoke about in our Dvar Torah for Shavuot, that with the first Luchot at Matan Torah, there would have been no toiling, there would have been no Torah Shabbat Peh. We would have seen the Luchot, and everything would have been clear to us. We would have understood all the Torah Shabbat Peh just by looking at it. There wouldn't have been this hard work. It says, going back to our Tikkunei HaZohar, Ela itmar bo, v'dibartim ela sela, benatan meimav. What should it have been? It should have been speak to it nicely, calmly, belo torach, without an effort. V'yemit kayem behon, v'lo yimedu od, and it would have been able to fulfill the pasuk in Yirmiyahu. It says in Yirmiyahu, ki zot habrit asher achot et bnei Yisrael. Hashem said, and this is the brit I'm going to make with Beit Yisrael. Achrei yimim ahem neum Hashem. Natati et torati bekirbam. Hashem says, I'm going to put my teachings into their innermost being, v'alibam echtevena, and on their hearts I'm going to inscribe it. V'ayiti lahem Elohim v'hem hayuli de'am, and I'll be their God and they'll be my nation. That's the pasuk in Yirmiyahu. It's supposed to be a Torah or connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem puts the Torah into our hearts. V'have nafik maya belo kasha umachloke upsak, and closes the Tikkunei HaZohar on this point. And the water would have come forth. It would have emerged without difficulty, without kasha, without debate, without machloket. Ubepsak, and there would be no decisions. It would have all been clear. We wouldn't have had any of these machlokot. If we go to the Betzurat David on that pasuk in Yirmiyahu, it says Betzurat David, Valibam, and on their hearts, Echtevena, I'm going to inscribe it, I'm going to write it on their hearts. Retzono lomar, Lo tishkach milibam, ki ilu hayta chakuka shama. We wouldn't have forgotten it. It would be on our hearts, and we wouldn't forget it as if it would have been engraved, chakuka. So too says the Pri Tzaddik in his Dvar Torah on Shavuot. He says the writing on the heart is similar to all those psukim in Divrei Chazal about the charut alibenu, that should be engraved into our heart, similar to the Torah that was engraved on those first set of luchot. That's the level we were supposed to be on. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. If Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have hit the rock, we would have had it all, because it seems the Shekhinah was right there, ready to put it into our hearts. Begin the Shekhinah, says the Tikkunei HaZohar, the Shekhinah, the Itmar Ba, Haloko Devrai Ke'esh Neum Adonai, as it says about it, that aren't all my words like the fire, says God. Havesharia bepumayon the Israel would have been in the mouths of the Jewish people. The ihi oraita de be'al peh. This is the Torah be'al peh. The ihi sela. That it's the sela. What does sela stand for? Sela is samech lamed ayin. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. Sela are the letters al samech. Read it backwards. Al samech on the samech. The inun shitin mesechtot the hachi ihu sela al samech. This corresponds to the 60 mesechtot, the 60 tractates that make up the Torah Shebe'al Peh. The Torah Shebe'al Peh, the Mishnayot, comes up to 60 mesechtot. The 60, the samech mesechtot is al sela, is al samech. That's the word sela. So according to Tikkunei HaZohar, Moshe hitting the rock is what led us to have all the Torah Shebe'al Peh, all the toiling, all the 60 mesechtot. There's the shishim mesechtot, as we know in the pasuk, shishim giborim sariv la. There are the 60 giborim that surrounded. There's the Talmidei Chachamim that are fighting their giborim. They're fighting to try to get to the emet of the Torah. As we said from the Beit HaLevi in our Shavuot Dvar Torah just a couple of weeks ago, those first luchot before the sin of the egel, they were perfect. There was no need for a Torah Shebe'al Peh. There was no need for an Adam ki amut ba'ohel. It would have been so clear to us. Says the Tikkunei HaZohar. That was what was supposed to happen if Moshe would have spoken to the Sela. That would have been the koch of the Dibur, the much softer, lighter approach that would have just brought forth the water so easily. Says about Avram Kluger in his Sefer Niflaot Asicha. He says the Psukim are also hinting that Hashem wanted this big Matan Torah type event because once the waters disappeared, Moshe turned to Hashem. Hashem, what do I do? Hashem said, Hakelet ha'edah, gather all the people. This was supposed to be a big event. When was the last time we gathered all the people? That's Matan Torah. And when Moshe and Aaron failed, Hashem responds to him. Yan lo emantem bilak yishenu le'enei bnei Israel. It was supposed to be in front of the eyes of bnei Israel. This was supposed to be a massive event for the new generation. This is the new generation in the desert. This was a generation that was born in the desert. So now HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us an event like Matan Torah. Matan Torah was the OG level of Dibur. That was the giving of the Aseret HaDibrot. That's what was supposed to happen right now. Moshe was supposed to use Dibur instead of the Mateh and have an event like the Aseret HaDibrot, have a Matan Torah happening right now. And there are many Mefarshei Asod v'Aremez that take this Kabbalistic teaching and they take it to the fullest. I saw in the Chidah in our parasha, in the Chomat Anach Bayas, he says, the Ayedei HaKahat HaSela Garma HaShircha V'aya Machloket. Where does forgetfulness, where does forgetting the Torah come from? Where does Machloket come from? It's because Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock. He writes further that Moshe's language of Hamin HaSela, he tells the people, what, from this rock you want me to take out Hamin HaSela. Where else did we find this language of Hamin? We see Hamin HaEtz. After Adam and Chava sin with the Etz Hadat, Hamin HaEtz, did you eat from this tree? Hamin, Adam and Chava, that was the first time that division came into the world, that machloket came into the world. That's when shichacha, when death, Adam kemut ba'od, the concept we have to have death in the world, that we need to have toiling in the world, that we have to work hard to bring about the lechem, the Adam kemut ba'ohel, as we saw in the Shla Kadosh, in last year's Dvar Torah on the parasha. The Chidah writes that the creation of machloket even led to the machloket over how to identify the Etz Hadat. What tree is it? Is it a chitah? Is it geffen? Is it te'ena? What is the actual tree itself? That machloket itself came about because they ate from the tree. Had Moshe spoken to the Sela, machloket would have disappeared. So too it says the Megillah Makot in Ofen Ayin Daled. He says Moshe hitting the rock led to the Torah coming out only in drops. Slowly, drawing it out, meaning we have to toil to bring it out. Amelim b'Torah, we got to bring out the Torah. And so too we find the Megillot on our Parsha is the same thing, and so too we find in the Kutei Moharan, says Rabbi Nachman in Torah Yud Bet. Some Rishonim, for example the Rambam, and those who explain the Rambam, they learned that part of the mistake of Moshe was getting angry and giving tochacha to the people. When he calls them Hamorim, when he calls them those rebels, and there's Kaas. Lanut dati, it's Moshe's anger, so to speak. It's Moshe hitting up the rock. This became like a kind of ma'aseh avot siman labanim for all the Talmidei Chachamim, for all of the learners today, all of us who toil in Torah, try to learn. We want to try to get somewhere in life. Every single Jew, we want to try to make it. But now we have to make it in the same way that Moshe related to that Sela. And this might be the hidden meaning, ulai, in the Gemara in Tanit, Daf Daled Amud Aleph. It says, V'amar Rava, says Rava, Haid Tzuber Rabbanan Deratach. When you find yourself a Torah scholar who gets angry, it's the Torah that's angering him. He's fighting over the Torah. Because what is the Torah? The Torah is like fire, says the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Then similarly, Rabbi Ashi says, Rav Ashe, Kol Tamid Chacham she'enu kashe kabarzel. Any Tamid Chacham that's not strong and hard like barzel, like iron, Eino Tamid Chacham. He's not Tamid Chacham. She'emar ukepatish yifotzetz sela. And like a hammer, he's going to break through the sela. That now became the job of the Talmid Chacham. There's going to be kaas, there's going to be anger, there's going to be ritcha, there's going to be excitement. There's also going to be the hitting through, the breaking through the sela. Moshe Rabbeinu's actions appear to have been a siman labanim, a maseh avot siman labanim, for us today and how we learn Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu's hitting of the Sela is reminiscent to his breaking of the first luchot. Just this time, we don't find in Chazal that Hashem says, Yasher kochacha, for breaking the luchot. The Sela symbolizes the potential of those first luchot. They're the stones of the Avnei Shaish Tahor, where you cannot say Mayim. It's a single Torah with no need for an oral Torah. The Torah Shabbat Peh is symbolized by water, the Be'er, even the language of Be'er. I saw one of a different Torah, Rabbi Nachman, he says, Be'er, language of Meva'er, to explain, Bi'ur Torah. Many of the Hasidic rabbis, they go in this angle. Be'er is Leva'er, to explain. It's the Bi'ur, it's the Torah Shabbat Peh. Mei Meriva is this language of the Riv, of the fighting over the Pshatim of the Torah. It appears that if there had been the right speech from Moshe Rabbeinu right now, if Moshe would use his peh in the proper way, there would have been no need for a Torah Shabbat Peh. I ran by some of these ideas with Rabbi Khan, and as we're discussing this point, he said to me, yeah, that makes sense, because what do we know about Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu is known as the kavad peh. He's the heavy of mouth. He's one that's difficult for him to speak. He says, I'm not an ish devarim, and it appears that at this point right now, he still wasn't an ish devarim. Hashem wanted him to be on that level. Hashem wanted to speak to him, and Hashem says, I speak to him peh el peh, mouth to mouth. He wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to use that dibur, but ultimately, Moshe's personal limitations in his own eyes, not seeing himself as the ish devarim, it ultimately played out in the spiritual reality of our parasha by not speaking to the rock. We actually mentioned once in the past, based on the Or Chaim HaKadosh, that Aaron was also a kvad peh, but ultimately he had that earlier emunah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so he became the peh for Moshe Rabbeinu. Lanu dati, this might also explain the perplexing question we find amongst the Rishonim. They all wonder, what did Aharon do wrong in our story? Why is he punished? Why does Hashem want Aharon there? Why is he being punished? We know that Aharon is supposed to be the peh for Moshe Rabbeinu. So if Moshe is struggling right now with his dibur, that's Aaron's job. You have to now bring your peh, you have to bring the dibur. Although we could don Aaron a little bit of kaf zechut, because maybe Aaron understood right now that Moshe Rabbeinu, this is probably Moshe Rabbeinu's test. Hashem wants Moshe now to use his peh. Hashem wants to elevate Moshe himself. And ultimately Moshe is going to get to this level. Moshe Rabbeinu is going to become the ish devarim. He's going to teach us all the mitzvot in Sefer Devarim, the Sefer that's the devarim of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's considered to be his diburim. Okay, but now returning to this concept of the Mayim. I saw in one of the Perushim on the Tikkunei HaZohar that the two hits, the two drops that come out, these lead to the two tears from HaKadosh Baruch Hu over the destruction of the first and second temples. Now, this concept of the number two, we said right now that we have the Mayim. We spoke about the two mateh, one mateh coming from the Etz Hadat, the other one coming from the Etz HaChaim. So interestingly enough, in the Tikkunei HaZohar, they also seem to understand that the concept of the stone, the Sela, also seems to have a double Sela. You know, if we're relating the Sela in our parasha to the first luchot, well, we know that we have a first luchot, and we know we have a second luchot. So explain to Tikkunei HaZohar that the first stones were known as the luchot habrit, and luchot habrit, that corresponds to the level of Etz HaChaim. So just like there was a mateh that corresponds to Etz HaChaim, there was the luchot habrit, which corresponds to the first set of luchot. They correspond to that higher level. But the second luchot, which are referred to as luchot avanim, that's known as that corresponds to the level of the Etz Hadat. So the same theme that we saw with the mateh, we're going to see now as well when it comes to the stone. Now, right now, we're in the world of the second luchot. We're in the world of post hitting the rock. So now we have a yetzer hara. We have desire, and that desire now needs to be harnessed in order to use that and take the desire, take the tava, and make that the kochot that we put into our actual learning. But the concept of division, the concept of these machlokot, this is all the world of the second luchot. This is the world of the Etz Hadat Tov Vara. This is the world of the Memtet Tahor and the Memtet Tameh. This is the lower level. This is the level of Olam Hazeh, symbolized by that letter Hey, which makes the full letters of the Memtet and the Hey. But Rabbi Akiva is warning them, when you get up to that higher level, when you get up to the level of the higher Sela, you get up to the level of the first Luchot, you get up to the level of the Sha'ar Nun, there is no duality anymore. There is no two ways of looking at things. There's only unity. There's only oneness. So if we go back to this concept of Mayim, so I saw two different ways to understand what does it mean when he says, when you get up to Avnei Shaish Tahor, when you get up to that pure marble stone, don't say Mayim. So what does it mean, don't say Mayim? So approach number one, which is kind of the approach we've been saying until now, is learning that don't say there's two. Don't say mayim. There's a water here and a water there. There's a mayim elonim, a mayim tachtonim. Don't say there's two. There's really only one. There's only achdut. And this works beautifully with this idea that there's no longer two Torot. There's no longer a Torah sheba'al peh along with a Torah shebichtav, but rather there's only one. The crowns are now back on the letters. When you look at that first luchot, all the Torah is right there. You don't have to toil. You don't have to work hard. You don't have to fight it out. It's all one. That would be approach number one. Approach number two learns that when he says, don't say, when you get up to this marble stone, don't say mayim, because there is no water at all. And that seems like the simpler pshat, where he says, because that would be lying. What's lying? Because there is no water. Rather, it's all an illusion. The shine of the pure marble stone itself, that it's just the shine. It's the shine of the stone. Meaning, on this higher level, there's not supposed to be any water at all. There is no need for a Torah shel ba'al peh. There is no need for toiling. So this also works according to our approach, where we're saying we're supposed to get to this level where we don't need a Torah shel ba'al peh. There is no water. But now that Moshe uses the mateh, he hits the sela, we now have machloket. We now have to hit it. We have to work hard. We have to break through the sela with that hammer. We got to work hard. Now, Rabbi Khan told me a nice idea. He says this explains why a few psukim later in our parasha, when we actually start traveling in the actual physical traveling of the Jewish people, we see that we have to return. We have to go over our journey in certain parts all over again. As the pasuk says, "Vayisu mehor hahar." We left Hor Hahar. That's where Aaron died. Derech Yamsuf. We went by the way of the Yamsuf. Lisvovet Eretz Edom, in order to bypass and go around the land of Edom. But Tiktzar Nefesh Ha'am Badarech, and the people became very, the spirit grew short on the journey. It was difficult for people, this long journey that we're doing. Now Rashi comments on the current location. What do you mean that we left Hor Hahar? We left where Aaron died and went Derech Yamsuf. We went by the Yamsuf. So he says that's not where we're supposed to be. So says Rashi, Kevan shemet Aharon ubat alei milchama zo. Since Aharon died and then we got attacked, chazru la'achorehem derech Yamsuf. We went backwards. We went back towards the derech of the Yamsuf. Hu aderech shechazru lahem kashenigzar lehem zeratim meraglim. So too, when we had the sin of the spies, we had to go back, and then now we're going to be stuck in the desert for 40 years. Back then, we also had to go back derech Yamsuf. Shneamar usu midbara derech Yamsuf. And now in this case, after the death of Aaron, after this little fight with the non-Jews, we had ourselves, we had to go back 7 journees. As the pasuk says that we traveled, and in there in Mosera, Aharon died. But Rashi asked, but did Aaron die in Mosera? No. We know from our parasha he dies in Hor Hahar. So when we're talking about the Masa'od, and we're going to speak about the journeys of the Jewish people, why does it say that he died in Mosera? Ela sham chazeru v'it'abelu alav v'spidu ki'iluhu b'fneihem. But rather, what happens? We went backwards. We did chazara. We went backwards, and then we mourned Aharon. We did hesped. We cried. As if Aharon was in front of us. That's why it said that he died in Mosera, even though really he died in Hor Hahar. And if you go and you count the journeys in the Masa'od, you're going to see that there were 7 journeys between Mosera and Hor Hahar. So that means we went back, we did Chazara 7 times. So it says Rabbi Khan beautifully that now that we're in the world of Torah Sheba'al Peh, now that we're in the world we have to toil and work hard. So what's one of the biggest things you have to do when you learn Torah? Everybody knows you're learning a Gemara, you have to do Chazara. You have to do chazara, you have to repeat it, you have to go over it again, even though you've learned it once, learn it again. As the Gemara says, someone who learns something 101 times is so much greater, it's a different Torah than learning it 100 times. We have to do chazara. So says Rabbi Khan, physically, we're doing chazara in our journeys in the desert. Am Yisrael itself is doing a physical chazara, and this is mimicking the idea that we're going to have to now do chazara with the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Now, we mentioned in the past that we know the Gemara 101 times to relearn is Gematria Michael. So I saw it brought down. I didn't have time to look into it in too much detail, but apparently Michael, Gematria 101, he also seems to be the angel over water of Mayim, which worked very nicely. And also, as we mentioned, that Pihu, also, that now if we're talking about now we have to have a Torah Sheba'al Peh. We didn't get to the Peh that Hashem wanted, but we have to now do it through toiling. Pihu is also Gematria 101. We have to study 101 times. And now, just as Aharon and Moshe are going to have to die, and Moshe himself is going to be hidden away in a grave in the Sinai desert that we can't find, so says the gra by us in the Biur Gra and the Chumash, a beautiful, beautiful gra they bring down, that he says, just like Moshe has to be hidden away, not to be found, so too the Sodot of the Torah, the great lights of the Torah, have to be hidden away as well. Just like now we need an oral Torah, we have to be Amelim, we have to work hard. So Moshe's death itself, and Moshe himself being hidden away, is itself a symbol of the hiding away of the deepest parts of the Torah. It's not, I guess it's not some coincidence that he reaches the level of 50 right when he dies, and when he goes up to Har Nevo, and now he's hidden away. So just like he's hidden away in Har Nevo, so too the Nun Bo, that 50th gate, is also hidden away. Ulai, we can take the Gra even that one extra step. But we have to now be Amelim. So now our job is to try to work hard and try to rediscover it, to try to uncover it. And he actually writes beautifully not to underestimate the Agadata'ot. The Agadatas in the Gemara, all the stories of the Gemara, don't make light of them, because he writes that in these stories are hidden the deepest orot, the deepest lights of the Torah are hidden in the stories of the Gemara for us to be able to unleash in those Agadatas. Okay, so our job again is to dig up those wells to bring up the water. Now the Torah is compared in different places to all different types of drinks and foods. We have the Torah that's like the milk on Shavuot, we have the wine, but two main things we find this more in the Chumash, is we have ourselves the concept of the lechem, and we have ourselves the concept of the mayim. And in truth, really, I did see some different machlokot of how to understand these sugiyot. I saw in the Abir Yaakov, which we'll get to Bezat Hashem, in Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzer, he actually learns it a little bit differently. But in Sefer Nachalat David, this is Chelik Bet Derush Daled, this is one of the Talmidim of Chaim of Volozhin, he writes that when the Torah is called lechem, bread, refers to Torah Shebichtav. That's the staple, that's the base. The lechem is the Torah Shebichtav. He says, mayim, water, is a code word for the Torah Shebe'al Peh. Now, we know that the death of Miriam, the zechut of the water disappears. The be'er, the be'er Torah, the oral Torah, in a certain sense, now disappears. And maybe we can say, maybe we can say that we weren't supposed to have a Torah Shebe'al Peh anymore, based on these Zohars, based on Levi ideas that we saw by the first and second Luchot. Maybe there is this concept that there is a point where Hashem doesn't want a be'er anymore. Hashem doesn't want a meva'er. Hashem doesn't want a Torah Shebe'al Peh. Hashem doesn't want water anymore. Rather, we want to be on a level of just lechem, a level of just Torah Shebichtav. Now, what was Moshe's zechut? Moshe's zechut was the man. It was the bread from the heaven. It was the lechem min hashamayim. As opposed to regular lechem, or lechem min haaretz, we have to work the ground really hard. His lechem is lechem min hashamayim. It's the bread that already comes down ready-made. So much so that the Midrashim say the man tastes like anything you wanted. It was like the perfect food that came down. So I was thinking, this takes us back to an idea that we said in the past from Sefer Nayot Me'eden, on the volume on Pesach, where he writes that the sin of the eating of the Etz Hadat, according to one approach in Chazal, the Etz Hadat was wheat, it was chita. But it wasn't the wheat that we see today. It wasn't the wheat today that we have to grind down and we have to add water to and yeast and turn it into bread. We know that it was called a pri. So the bread, the wheat in the times of the Garden of Eden was already a fruit. Or say it more clearly, it was fully baked bread. That we had these bread trees in the Garden of Eden, the bread was in its fruit form. But after the sin of Etz Hadat, the bread was cursed. We had bezat apech tochal lechem. You have to work hard to create lechem, to create bread. It became, the Torah says, like an esav. It came like a grass. So we had this concept, the ground is now cursed. We have kotz, vidardar. It went from a bread fruit, a pri, to an esev, to this vegetable down in the ground. But now we have to turn the esev, we have to turn the grass back into bread. We have to reconstitute it. How do we reconstitute the wheat? We add water to it. We add water. By adding water, we're making the tikkun and bringing the bread back to the level of the fruit. So the bread is a Torah Shebichtav. Really, the Torah Shebichtav originally was supposed to be perfect. They didn't need a Torah Shebe'al Peh, but then it got cursed. And now it got down to the level that it needs the water added to it to make it have taste, to make it have flavor, to make it edible. And that's the Torah Shebe'al Peh that makes the Torah Shebichtav edible. But in Moshe's case, the man was lechem min hashamayim. It came down from the heavens. It was already ready-made without any work. It came right in front of your own door. We didn't need to put that hard work into it. That symbolizes a Torah of where Torah Shebe'al Peh is not needed, where water is not needed. So Lanut Dati, maybe we can say that with Miriam dying, the disappearance of the be'er, disappearance of the water is now a statement that we're moving from the lechem min hashamayim, we're moving towards the lechem min hashamayim. We're no longer going to need the lechem min haaretz. We're no longer going to need the water to try to make that fix. We don't need it anymore. We're lechem min hashamayim. We're back to the state of perfect, only Torah Shebichtav. And that also will include it, no need to toil. It's no longer going to be b'ze'ata pecha tochal lechem. You don't have to toil to make the bread. The bread will already go back to the way it was supposed to be without that hard work. Now, Kabbalistically, in that Sefer Nachalat David, he writes that the lechem in the case of Moshe was mina shamayim, while the water, the be'er was bringing the water from down below, from the aretz. Normally a lot of times you think of water coming from above, the rain, and the lechem mina aretz, but here it's the opposite. You have the lechem coming mina shamayim, and you have the water coming down from the aretz, and he learns this in terms of Kabbalistic terms of the upper and lower, the ila'an, the tata'ah, a zivug, this coming together of the heaven and earth that was taking place with these two zechiyot of Moshe and Miriam. But now it appears that Dachdut would have happened. We would have already been there, and I would no longer need the water part anymore because the bread itself would already be elevated back to its original state. Now, Lanyu Dati, this also might be a pshat, that now that we have water, now that we have to work, and now the water is the be'er, it comes down from the aretz, that might also explain when we say lo b'shamayim, when there's a machloket, in oral Torah between the rabbis, and this was trying to bring miracles to prove his case, and the rabbis say, no, lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is down below, it's given down to earth, it's lo b'shamayim hi, because that's by the machlokot of the oral Torah, it's in the level of the aretz, from the level of the be'er, it's from the level where we're allowed to fight it out down below, and there is a 49 tahor, there is a 49 tameh, we fight it out for the pshat, it's not from up above, where there's a oneness, where there's a clear-cut halacha. Now I saw in another source, I saw that in a certain sense, the dibur that Hashem wants Moshe to give to the rock is also this concept of bringing the two opposites together. That the dibur, that's what makes man, speech is what makes man the most lofty of all creations. We said once in the past from Rav Feiner that our lips are the only part of our body that are inside and out. And you look at the way the lips looks like the skin from the inside because we're bringing out our souls. It's a way to elevate ourselves when we talk. We learn Torah, we speak, we say tefillot, we teach Torah. We're able to make what makes man so great. As the Targum Unklu says, the koch of speech, that's what makes man man. That's what he says, the ruach memalela, the koch of speaking, that's the greatness of a human being. So now Hashem wants this dibur to come down and put it onto the selah. The selah, the rock, that's the symbol, even until today, of the most mundane, inanimate object. But Hashem wanted to put these two together. Moshe was supposed to unite the two, and in that union, the physical world would have been elevated, the toiling would have gone away, it all would have been fixed. Now, in Sefer Bituche Chotam of the Abir Yaakov, this is Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzera, he writes on our parsha a lot of similar things from Tikkun HaZohar. He learns the symbolism of the Mateh and the Selah in a slightly different way, Ayin Shama, but in the end, he hints to one of the most beautiful mashalim I have ever heard, and it was so special that I actually recorded it as the simple Dvar Torah for this week as well. Says the Abir Yaakov, he says that right now that we live in a world of machloket, and it's machloket in Torah, you might think there's a pgam, you might think there's a blemish in our reality, but he says there's no blemish. From our perspective down below, things are the way they're supposed to be, and we have our tikkunim now. From our perspective, this is actually really beautiful. All these machlokot and all these fights and all this toiling and all this difficulty, now that we live in that reality, now it's beautiful. And he says, when the rabbis argue with one another, when one says mutar, the other one says asur, this says tahor, this says tameh, this says zakai, this says chayav, all of it leads to the beauty of the Torah. And he bases it on a Zohar Chadash that says that all these machlokot are what's called lekashet et hakala, to adorn the bride, to put the jewelry on the kala. What does that mean? He says the rabbis arguing is these arguments themselves are symbolically the jewelry of the Torah. He says that one rabbi is saying this kala should wear diamond earrings in this case. Another one says no. In this particular case, it's better if she wears pearls. This one says put on a headscarf. That one says put on a sheitel. But it's all out of kavod for the kala. And the kala, the Torah knows that this is kavod for the Torah. Says the Zohar Kadosh on Shir HaShirim that the work of the Talmid Chacham is to unify the oral Torah with the Torah Shebichtav, to tie those crowns back on. But each person understands the bigger picture of the Torah in a different way. You know, the machloket between Moshe and Aharon in the Torah when it came to the korbanot after Nadab and Avihu died, each one had a really good point they were trying to make. But there's a bigger picture. But sometimes in seeing the bigger picture, meaning when you come up to a halakha question, this is why you have such long teshuvot in the shutim, you have such teshuvot, you have such long responsa, because they're going back and forth because there's different ways to see things. And where do you place your weight? Which is the more important value when being posek halakha? But when you have the bigger picture, sometimes in this particular case, you'll say mutar. That person will say asur. And in a different case, it'll be flipped. He'll say asur, you'll say mutar, mutar, asur. It gets flipped. Why? Because he says, he takes this mashal of the kala. So one person says the better way is for her to wear a short shaitel, put a wig on with no earrings, a pearl necklace. Another one says, no, do a headscarf, gold earrings, and they can also use, and also a diamond bracelet. And everyone is fighting over the beauty. These Talmidei Chachamim are fighting over the beauty of the kala to present her to her chatan. These like the shushvinin, I guess. They're kind of like the helpers for the wedding, getting her ready for the wedding to her husband. And when the husband sees her coming so beautifully walking down, and he hears the whole story that was taking place with the Talmidei Chacham trying to figure out what's best, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful for the kala. They're all fighting. They don't want it to clash. They don't want to look bad. They want to say, if you go with your approach, it's not going to fit the bigger picture. So that's why mutar and asur, it all makes sense in the bigger picture of how the Torah appears. But that's beautiful for the kala. That makes the Torah feel loved. That's kavod. And says the Abir Yaakov, that's what's really going on in our machloket when it says that it was mei meriva et Hashem, that it was this water of fighting. Et Hashem, he learns it's for Hashem. It's all for the sake of Hashem and all for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. So now we live in a world post the hitting of the rock. We now have a desire for this water. We also have a desire for this bread. And we have a desire to put the two together. Let's have our meal with our bread and with our water. And maybe, and we see in this generation, Baruch Hashem, as low as this generation may have fallen in many ways, we do see a tremendous desire to learn. So maybe we can close off this part of the Devar Torah with the words of the Navi in Amos, made popular by Yishai Ribon, one of his songs, where it says the Navi, this is Amos Perichet Pasuk Yud Aleph, Hine Yamim Ba'im, after some negative prophecies, says the Navi, Hine Yamim Ba'im Ne'um Hashem Elokim. Hashem says that special days are coming. Vishlachti Ra'ab Ba'aretz, I'm going to send a famine upon the land. Lo Ra'ab Lalechem, but it's not going to be a physical famine for bread and a physical thirst for water, but rather kim lishmoat divrei Hashem. But rather it's to hear the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I.e., a time is going to arrive where the Jewish people will yearn to hear the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Bezrat Hashem, we're living in that time period where we thirst and we're hungry for more Torah and for deeper Torah and digging those deeper wells. And even though we're this lowly generation, we're standing on the shoulders of previous great generations. So maybe Bezrat Hashem, we too can be elevated to that Dor De'ah and reach some really high levels. Bezrat Hashem, we have one more part of this Devar Torah. If you made it this far, where I want to try, Bezrat Hashem, maybe we can try to figure out what was Moshe Rabbeinu's thinking in not hitting the rock. Shabbat Shalom.